Search up Stateless.
Presents articles on the Adoptee Citizenship at Oxford House Hotel with Professor Kim Nelson of State University, Professor Ellen Kim of Dr. Andy Cho of Alliance for Adoptee, and Emily Warnock of Alliance for Justice. Join us to learn how we can come together to help pass the adoptee citizenship that will give citizenship to more than real adoptees without U.S. citizenship.
경기도 고양시의 진도 이학년을 일치문화에서 40개 안성을 승진지 발표했습니다. 경찰 조사관이 14층에서 도로 등진 것으로 확인했습니다. 승진 남성은 미국으로 1년을 있다가 한국으로 추가가 돼 왕세서 경찰서로 미국인을 필리핀에 1980년 8살이던 김씨는 미국 필라델피아의 한 가정에 입양됐지만 중국의 아빠의 영향으로 불국자 졸기 시절을 보냈습니다. 김씨는 선생이 된 폭행 사건 재판을 받던 중 본인이 불법 체류자인지를 알게 됐습니다. 시민권을 신청하자 김씨는 2012년 불법 체류자 신분이나 자전거 정보, 필름의 전달, 한국으로 강제 추방됐습니다. 한국으로 진입했던 김씨는 한국에서의 삶도 순탄치 않았고 민주의 인간을 사용하는 이름으로 발견했습니다. (1950년대) 이후 미국으로 입양한 한국과 시민관계를 중 시민권이 언급자는 2만 명 정도로 추정됩니다. 이 가운데 실제 6명이 강제 추방되는 것으로 파악됐습니다. 그분을 먼저 혈액의 사랑과 기록하는 가운데 앞으로 지금까지 이어지고 있습니다. 조선군대
네, 한 가지 안내를 다시 한 번 더 드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 컨퍼런스에 방문하신 분들은 모두 영어로 말씀을 하실 예정입니다. 그래서 우리말 통역이 필요하신 분들은 응시 통역 서비스를 받으실 수가 있는데요. 우리말 통역을 원하시는 분은 앞에 프론트에 가시면 이렇게 생긴 응시 통역기를 받으실 수가 있어요. 이걸 뒤에 꽂으면 바로 응시 통역으로 우리말로 들으실 수가 있습니다. 우리말 서비스가 필요하신 분들은 앞에 가셔서 우리말 통역기를 꼭 챙기셔서 좋은 내용을 편하게 잘 들으시면 좋겠습니다. 앞으로 프론트에 가셔서 통역기 꼭 받으세요. 그리고 핸드폰은 11시 전에 있습니다.
Tell me when this is like, you see it? The other one? Yeah, I'm gonna do the risky one. You can see that all? It's a scene.
Okay, just put it back to where it was.
김혜정 회장님,
For the other one?
김혜정 회장님, 무대 앞으로 나와주시기 바랍니다. 김혜정 회장님, 무대 앞으로 나와주십시오.
Yeah, we're just making sure.
They just love it on candy. Just sit down.
Good morning. My name is Kim, and I am the president of Korean Women's International Network, Pacific Region. Thank you all for sacrificing your valuable Saturday to attend our conference on the Adoptee Citizenship Act. We hope that by the end of the conference, you will feel enlightened and empowered to take action to finally pass the legislation that will give U.S. citizenship to all adoptees who were unfairly denied their citizenship. We'll start the conference now by introducing you to our MCs. Lee Hyun-ju, who's an announcer at Radio Korea, and Isaac Kim, Executive Director of Korean Research Center.
네, 안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 오늘 행사의 진행을 맡은 이현주라고 합니다. 다시 한번 인사드립니다. 반갑습니다.
안녕하세요. 제 이름은 김진우입니다. Hello, my name is Isaac Kim.
네, 미국으로 입양된 우리 한인분들 가운데 18,000명에서 19,000명 또는 숨겨지는 더 많은 그 이상의 입양인분들이 양부모의 잘못으로 시민권 없이 지금 서류 미비자로 살아가고 있는 그런 실정이라고 합니다.
Out of all Korean adoptees in the United States, between 18,000 and 19,000 do not have U.S. citizenship due to mistakes made by their adoptive parents.
네, 이분들 가운데 이미 50명 정도는 한국으로 추방해 주셨고요. 너무나 안타깝게도 가운데 한 분은 스스로 목숨을 끊으시기도 하셨습니다.
50 of them have already been deported back to Korea, and tragically, one has taken their own life.
지난 2000년에 미소년 입양 자녀에게 자동이라는 법이 통과가 됐는데요. 그런데 너무나 안타깝게도 2000년 당시 성인이었던 1983년 이전에 태어나신 입양인분들은 그 법의 혜택을 받지 못하고 계십니다.
In the year 2000, a law was passed that automatically grants citizenship to all adopted minors, but those born before 1983, who were adults at the time, did not benefit from this law.
그래서 이분들을 위해서 5차례나 연방의회에 법안을 신청을 했는데요. 이 5번 모두 다 무산되고 말았습니다.
To help these people, the Adoptee Citizenship Act was proposed 5 times, but it failed all 5 times.
그래서 법안 통과를 위해서 우리 한인 사회가 그 어느 때보다 더 크게 목소리를 높여야 할 때가 아닌가 싶습니다.
Our Korean community needs to raise our voices to get this law passed.
그래서 한국의 여성가족부, LA 총영사관, 그리고 세계 한민족 여성 네트워크이 모두 함께 힘을 모아서 무국적 입양인 국적 찾아주기 캠페인을 하고 있습니다.
For this event today, Korea's Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, the Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in Los Angeles, and the Korean Women's International Network have come together to promote the campaign to grant U.S. citizenship to stateless adoptees.
그리고 이 행사를 통해서 무국적 입양인 국적 찾아주기에 좀 더 많은 도움을 얻고자 유튜브를 통해서 한국어 그리고 영어로 지금 생중계 방송되고 있습니다.
This event is also being live streamed. News today will provide a big push towards the passage of the Adoptee Citizenship Act. Thank you very much. We will now start the conference.
국민의례가 있겠습니다. 모두 자리에서 일어서 주시고요. 몸이 불편하신 분들은 앉아 계셔도 좋겠습니다.
We will now start the national anthem. Please stand. For those who are unable to, may remain seated.
네, 앞에 한국의 태극기 또 미국의 성조기가 있습니다. 국기에 대한 경례를 하도록 하겠습니다. 국기에 대하여 경례.
Salute to the flags of Korea and the United States. Salute.
바로 이어서 미국 국가 그리고 한국의 애국가 제창이 있겠는데요. 한국의 애국가와 미국 국가 제창에는 코인 미소국 퍼스픽 LA 지구의 이선희 서기님의 따님이신 준리님께서 자원봉사로 함께 해주시기로 하셨습니다. 준리님과 함께 애국가부터 먼저 부르고요. 이어서 미국 국가를 함께 부르도록 하겠습니다.
We will now sing the Korean national anthem and the United States national anthem, sung by June Lee, who is the daughter of Cohen Pacific LA Branch's Secretary Lee Sun-hee.
한국도 아주 곱게 예쁘게 차려입거나 주셨습니다. 오늘 아주 멋진 상품의 국가도 애국가가 되셨습니다. 마이크 들어가십니다. 모두 자리에 앉아주시기 바랍니다.
May be seated.
계속해서 코인 퍼스피리아의 우리의 다짐 선서가 있게 된데요. 김복순 부회장, 수박회계 두 분께서 수고해 주시겠습니다. 코인 회원분들께서는 모두 자리에서 일어서 주시기 바랍니다.
We will now have Korean Women's International Network, Cohen LA's oath led by Vice President Kim Bok-sun and Treasurer Soo Park.
우리의 다짐. 우리는 한민족으로 민족적 자부심을 갖고 건강한 자아성을 키워가며 지도자적 자세로 당당히 살아간다.
우리는 한민족임과 동시에 거주하는 세계 지역의 문화와 전통을 이해하며 그 지역 사회에 공헌하는 세계인이다.
우리는 각자의 개성과 환경을 이해하며 가진 재능과 경험과 지식을 함께 나눈다.
우리는 우리의 네트워크를 소중히 여기며 속한 회원 간의 우애 증진과 상호 교류, 이익 창출과 미래 번영을 도모한다.
우리는 서로 존중하며 서로 아끼며 서로 격려하며 풍요로운 번영과 행복의 꿈과 비전을 함께 키워나간다.
우리는 주위를 돌아보며 어렵고 소외된 지역의 여성들에게 도움과 베품의 손길을 펴나간다.
우리는 앞세대를 존경하고 차세대와 후세대를 중히 여기며 이들을 위한 교육과 장려를 아끼지 않는다.
우리는 긍정적이고 진취적인 삶을 살며 세계 안의 하나됨을 잊지 않는다.
우리는 평화와 친환경, 인류의 발전과 역사에 적극 기여한다.
우리는 세계 한민족 여성 네트워크 안에서 함께 창조하며 함께 승리한다. 감사합니다.
김봉훈 부회장, 수박피게 두 분의 우리의 다짐 함께 나눠봤습니다. 굉장히 멋진 다짐. 우리 모두도 가슴에 새겨야 되는 그런 다짐이지 않을까 싶습니다. 자, 계속해서 세계 한민족 여성 네트워크 호인 미소보 퍼스페일리 지부의 김혜정 회장의 환영사가 있겠습니다.
Now a welcome speech from Cohen President Kim Hye-jang.
Welcome our beloved friends and honored guests. As an affiliate organization of the Korean government's Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, and a chapter that is composed of first-generation Korean immigrant women and that celebrates our Korean heritage, we're honored to host this conference to highlight the plight of our fellow first-generation Koreans, Korean adoptees without U.S. citizenship. This is our second conference on the same theme in the past 3 years. Despite the enormity and the seeming insurmountability of the issue, the unjust nature of the human suffering it creates has compelled us to organize the conference and cajole and persuade you to donate and to attend the conference today. We dare to hope that this conference, also live streamed and preserved on our YouTube channel, will become an agent of solidarity and a spark for activism that will accomplish the passage of long overdue legislation to grant U.S. citizenship to adoptees. I'd like to extend my most heartfelt gratitude and respect to the conference committee members who gave their treasured time and energy to this conference, as well as to the rest of the membership for their generous and steadfast support. I would also like to acknowledge the invaluable support of our generous donors and volunteers. In addition, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to express my deepest appreciation and admiration for our distinguished panelists who have devoted a lot of time on the adoptee citizenship issue and whose insight and expertise elevate our conference. Above all, thank you all for taking interest in the stateless adoptee issue and for helping us celebrate our shared Korean heritage.
영어로 얘기하니까 엄청 또 멋있어 보이는 거는 좀 요즘 그 회장 또는 이사장 자리에 그 일종 옷에 이사님들이 많이 진출을 하셔서요. 또 새로운 변화가 있지 않을까 싶습니다.
Here's a congratulatory speech by Cohen Western U.S. Branch Officer Lee Kye-jun.
네, 계속해서 코인 미서부지부 이계주 담당관의 축사가 있겠습니다.
반갑습니다, 여러분. Young, handsome, pretty MCs. 좋습니다. 저 회장님께서 상세히 말씀을 잘 영어로 해주셨는데 저는 한국말로 조금 컴피트 같이 따로되는 센텐스가 있지만 저도 한번 하겠습니다. 네, 코인 패시픽 LA가 무국적 입양인 구제를 위한 법안 추진을 촉구하는 컨퍼런스를 개최해 주심에 김 회장님과 우리 모든 임원들께 진심으로 감사드립니다. 바쁘신 토요일에 이 자리를 빛내주기 위해서 기조연설 강연 참여해 주신 연사님과 기부님들께 환영 인사 드립니다. 대한민국 여성가족부 산하 Korean Women's International Network는 지역 사회에 공헌하는 세계 여성들에 연결된 단체입니다. 모국과의 유대를 강화하여 서로 윈윈, 외국에 사는 저희들과 한국에 사는 한국 여성들 서로 윈윈함으로써 4세대들에게 자랑스러운 대한민국 여성의 모습이 되고자 노력합니다. 2024년 금년도 코인 대회는 8월 29일부터 8월 31일까지 인천시 하얏트 호텔에서 개최됩니다. 세계 각국 30여 개 지국에서 국내외 한인 300여 명이 참석하게 되어서 여성가족부에서 주최해 주시고 인천광역시에서 후원을 합니다. 오늘 우리 이 컨퍼런스가 아까 MC들도 말씀하셨고 우리 회원님도 말씀하셨지만 여러 번 강조해도 정말 모자랄 정도입니다. 2021년도에 연방 하원을 통과했습니다. 그런데 상원의 지지를 받지 못해가지고 법안이 폐기됐습니다. 그래서 오늘 이 행사가 우리가 폐기된 법안을 다시 올려서 패스할 수 있도록 기원하면서 여러분의 많은 동참을 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
네, 세계한국의 여성협정 코인 미서부 퍼스빌리지회 이계주 담당관의 축사가 있었습니다. 계속해서 이혜진 이사장의 축사가 이어지겠습니다. 나와주시겠습니다.
Now a speech by Chairperson of Cohen Pacific LA's Board of Directors, Lee Hae-shin.
안녕하세요. 오늘 이 대한민국적 찾아주기 컨퍼런스에 대한 여러분의 관심과 성원 또 대면 비대면으로 동참해 주셔서 너무너무 감사하고 또 존경스럽습니다. 코인 퍼시픽 LA는 우리 다짐에 따라 아까 들으셨죠? 소외되고 어려운 이웃들을 돌아보며 내가 아닌 우리가 다 함께 잘 살기 위해서 도전받는 행사들을 꾸준히 이어오고 있습니다. 지역사회에 희망을 보태고 또 빛과 소금의 역할을 묵묵히 담당하시면서 이 컨퍼런스를 이끌어주신 고마우신 분들이 있어요. 컨퍼런스 준비위원님들, 또 후원자님들, 코인 퍼시픽 회원님들, 그 중에는 이사님들도 계시고 위서부적 담당관님도 계시고 역대 회장님들도 계십니다. 그분들께 또 이 자리에 함께해 주신 모든 여러분들께 깊이 감사드립니다. Welcome everyone. Thank you all, both in person and online, for coming to the Stateless Adoptee Citizen Act Conference. We appreciate your presence and are excited to have you join us. In accordance with our mission, Cohen Pacific LA has been consistently holding events that focus on looking after our neighbors in need. This conference is no exception. Today, we gather together to raise awareness, talk about important issues, and advocate for adoptees who are currently stateless. We are deeply grateful to the committee members, sponsors, and members who helped this event happen. Thank you. 감사합니다.
LA 이혜진 이사장의 축사였습니다. 계속해서 김용환 LA 총영사의 축사가 이어지겠는데요. 김용환 LA 총영사 축사는 한은실 영사께서 대독해 주시겠습니다.
Now some words from Kim Yong-wan, Consul General of the Republic of Korea, LA, delivered by Consul Han Eun-soo.
안녕하십니까. LA 총영사관 한은실 영사라고 합니다. 오늘 8월에 작년 8월에 LA 왔고요. 처음 뵙는 분들이 많으신 것 같은데 먼저 인사드리겠습니다. 김영환 총영사님께서는 다른 일정으로 오늘 현석에 올라오셔서 제가 대신 축사를 하게 되었고요. 귀한 자리에 이렇게 발언할 기회 주셔서 감사드립니다. 먼저 2024년 코인 퍼시픽 LA 컨퍼런스 개최를 진심으로 축하드립니다. 미주 동포사회를 이끄시는 이렇게 여성 지도자분들, 원로분들이 함께 모여서 이렇게 중요한 이슈에 뜻을 가져주시고 뜻깊은 행사를 개최해 주셔서 감사드립니다. 이 당은 단 한 번의 이벤트가 아닌 평생의 여정이고 스스로가 누구이고 내가 누구인지 찾아가는 정체성의 문제라고 생각합니다. 특히 어렸을 때부터 거의 40년 이상 미국인 정체성으로 살아오시던 분들이 아직도 시민권을 취득하지 못하신 것은 너무나 안타깝고 그리고 큰 아픔이라고 생각합니다. 여기 계신 모든 분께서 잘 아시다시피 이 문제의 종국적인 해결은 이 의회에서 이방인 시민권 법안 Adoptee Citizenship Act가 통과되는 것입니다. 이방인 시민권 법안 통과를 위해서 우리 동포 사회가 잊지 않고 계속해서 모멘텀을 만들어 주시고 우호적인 여론 형성을 위해서 노력해 주시면 좋겠습니다. 오늘 이 행사를 위해 수고해 주신 김 회장, 코인 퍼시픽 LA 회장님께 다시 감사드리고요. 한인 이방인 문제에 대해서 우리 동포 사회의 끊임없는 지원 다시 부탁드립니다. 감사드립니다.
네, 그동안 연일 총영사 축사를 우리 한은실 영사께서 대독해 주셨습니다. 계속해서 워싱턴주 제9지구 아담 스미트 연방하원의원께서 축하 영상을 보내주셨다고 합니다. 함께 보도록 하겠습니다.
We'll now watch a congratulatory video from Congressman Adam Smith of Washington State's 9th District.
Hello, I'm Adam Smith. I'm the congressman who represents the 9th District of the state of Washington. I want to thank the Korean Women's International Network for giving me the opportunity to speak today about the Adoptee Citizenship Act, something that I've been working on for quite some time. It's one of those things when it was first brought to my attention, gosh, probably 15 or more years ago now, I found it really rather shocking that someone could be adopted into this country from a foreign country as a baby and grow up and not have legal status in the U.S. But it does happen, where for whatever reason the proper paperwork is not filled out, and the child never is given citizenship. They turn 18, something happens with the parents, they don't have status. Now, quite a while ago, we did pass a law to change that. The thing that was not done is we did not grandfather in people who were 18 when that law was changed. So we still have, I think it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who grew up in this country, the only country they've ever known, do not have legal status here. That's just completely wrong. We've introduced the bill. We do have bipartisan support. We're trying to get it passed. It regrettably has been caught up in the broader immigration debate. But we are still absolutely committed to getting this bill passed and giving legal status to those adoptees that they so richly deserve. And I really want to thank the Korean community. A variety of different organizations have really been instrumental in pushing this piece of legislation and helping us to get co-sponsors in both the House and the Senate. We're going to continue to work on and get it passed. It's a matter of basic fairness for the people facing this problem. So we will get it done. And again, I thank the Korean Women's International Network and many other organizations that have been so instrumental in helping to push this piece of legislation forward. Thank you.
네, 아담 스미트 연방하원의원의 축사 함께 들어봤는데요. 7월 달에 선거했는데 꼭 당선이 되셔서 우리 무국적 입양 나를 위한 돕기 위한 법안이 올라갔을 때 찬성표 꼭 찍어주시리라고 믿습니다. 자, 계속해서 사진 촬영을 하겠는데요. 그대로 앉아 계시면 되고요. 대신에 시선은 저기 출입구 쪽으로 해주시면은 저기서 이 전체 뷰가 다 나오게 사진 촬영이 있을 예정입니다. 그래서 카메라 있는 쪽을 그러니까 몸을 돌리셔서 카메라 있는 쪽을 바라보시면 되겠습니다. 네.
Please stay seated and turn around facing the entrance. We will now take a group picture.
오늘 이 컨퍼런스에 참여해 주신 5분의 강사분이 무대 앞에 서 주실 것이고요. 함께 하신 분은 카메라를 보시면 되겠습니다. 그래서 이 자료를 많이 나눠서 무국적 입양인들이 그렇게 바라던 시민권을 가질 수 있게 됐으면 좋겠습니다. 오늘 강의를 해주실 5분의 강사분 가운데 4분께서요. 입양이 돼서 미국에 오신 분이라고 합니다. 그래서 이분들이 나중에 강의를 해주실 때 더 가슴에 감동 오는 얘기가 되지 않을까 싶습니다.
여기 이영기는 저기에서
네, 지금 옆쪽에 앉아 계시는 분들이 카메라에 다 안 잡힌다고 하는데요. 그 앞쪽으로 조금만 나와주시면 좀 사진 찍는데 좀 도움이 되지 않을까 싶습니다. 옆쪽에 앉아 계시는 분들께서는 불편하시겠지만 앞으로 조금만 몸을 움직여 주시면 좋겠습니다. 네, 고맙습니다. 너무 고맙습니다. 사진 찍느라고 애 많이 쓰셨습니다. 고맙습니다. 그리고 함께하고 계시는 지금 이 컨퍼런스는 유튜브를 통해서 생중계 방송되고 있습니다. 한국어와 영어로 진행이 되고 있고요. 혹시 늦게 오신 분 가운데 한국어 통역이 필요하시면 입구 쪽에 안내 데스크에 가셔서 동시 통역 원한다라고 하시면 조그만 라디오 같은 생긴 거 받으실 수가 있거든요. 그러면 동시 통역으로 우리말 서비스를 받으실 수가 있겠습니다. 자, 계속해서 김 회장께서 오늘 무국적 입양인의 국정체제적인 컨퍼런스에 강사로 나오신 5분들에 대해서 소개 말씀해 주시겠습니다.
Now, President Kim Hye-ja will introduce all 5 of today's speakers for the Stateless Adoptee Citizenship Conference.
It is my honor to introduce our distinguished panelists. First, we have Professor Kim Park-Nelson, who's an educator and researcher whose work uses adoption as a lens to understand race and culture. Her work has contributed to the building of the field of adoption studies and Korean adoption studies in the US, as well as internationally. Dr. Park-Nelson has authored or co-authored several published articles on adoption cultures and communities. Her book, Invisible Asians, Korean American Adoptees, Asian American Experiences and Racial Exceptionalism, was published by Rutgers University Press in spring of 2016. Her book is based on her ethnographic research exploring the many identities of adult Korean adoptees, as well as the cultural, social, historical, and political significance of 60 years of Korean adoption to the United States. She's an associate professor of ethnic studies at the Winona State University and is a 2023-24 Bush Foundation Fellow. Professor Elena Kim is a cultural anthropologist and professor of anthropology and Asian American studies at the University of California, Irvine. She's the author of Adopted Territory, Transnational Korean Adoptees and the Politics of Belonging, and Making Peace with Nature, Ecological Encounters Along the Korean DMZ, for which she has recently received.
네, 5분의 강사분에 대해서 소개해 주셨는데요. 그리고 네. 그리고 오늘 이 5분의 좋은 말씀을 우리말로 통역해 주실 통역사 2분을 소개해 드리겠습니다. LA 동국통역대학원의 캐서린 김 그리고 줄준희 2분께서 지금 부스 안에 앉아 계시는데 2분께서 동시 통역 도움 주고 계십니다. 크게 감사드립니다. 회장님 나머지 세 분도 인트로듀스 해주실 거예요? 예, 그러면 바로 시작하시면 될까요? 네, 시작해 주십시오.
Patience, we're going to test this with her. Good morning. My name is Kim Park Nelson. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Hee-Jung. Before we begin, I would like to thank Hee-Jung Kim and everyone who has participated in making this conference happen from Cohen, and also our collaborators at the Alliance for Adoptee Citizenship. And just before we begin, I just want to give a few remarks about how Alina and I came to collaborate on this project together. The two of us have been working together, well, kind of working side by side as adoption researchers since the time we were in graduate school in the early 2000s, or I guess in the 2000s. And we're always interested, so I'm a Korean adoptee. Alina is a Korean American researcher who's not adopted. And so for many, many years, we have tried to keep track of what's been happening inside the Korean adoptee community, and for my part, a broader transnational adoptee community in the United States and around the world. We're going to be talking in our paper a little bit about when adoptee citizenship issues became problematic in immigration history in the United States. But when we first started noticing interest in the Korean adoptee community around a deportation issue or an adoptee citizenship issue was 2011, 2012. There's a Korean adoptee by the name of Russell Green who had been processed for deportation. And for the first time, we saw a lot of interest in the Korean adoptee community to advocate to reverse that decision, to be able to allow him to give him a pathway to citizenship. There was, so this is kind of like in this period where there's starting to be more and more, I don't know if at that time you really call it social media, but there was kind of a YouTube campaign and a video campaign where adoptees came together to advocate to change his legal status so he would be able to stay in the United States. This was really interesting to both of us because this was the first time that the adoptee community really became engaged in these types of immigration and deportation discussions around the adoptee community. Of course, the anxiety around citizenship issues in the Korean adoptee community really ramped up in 2015, 2016 because of the campaign rhetoric of Donald Trump. And so we started to see, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit in our paper, we started to see a lot of anxiety among adopted Koreans in the United States who were worried that these threats of deportation or threats around anti-immigrant threats that were coming at the national stage. So we started seeing adoptees engaging in kind of community-wide discussions around immigration and belonging that we hadn't really seen happen in a broad way in the Korean adopted community. And so we decided maybe it's time for us to write about this because it's something that we're starting to see so broadly, and we thought it was such an interesting phenomenon. So what we're going to be presenting today, and I'll go over before we begin kind of what to expect, but what we are presenting today is really taken from a paper that we published in 2019 that focused on the federal immigration policy that affects adoptees, if that makes sense. Pardon me? Yeah, that seemed good. Okay. So just by way of what to expect and what we'll be covering this morning, so I teach Asian American Studies at the university, when I was at University of Minnesota. And I think that it's really important that when we start talking about issues of adoptee citizenship, that it's clear that the immigration justice issues that we're talking about today are really embedded in a longer, larger history of immigration policy in the United States. So the first kind of set of dates that I want to bring your attention to is this period of first Chinese exclusion and then Asian exclusion in the United States. You know, I'm guessing that this audience is maybe more aware of this. Oftentimes the kind of mainstream American audience, like most of my college students, are not aware that there is this period of almost 80 years where it was illegal for most Asians to immigrate to the United States. This, you know, this was sort of the first, this is kind of like the birth of immigration policy in the United States, and I think it's important to remember that immigration policy in the United States began to keep Chinese people out and eventually to keep all Asians out of the country. And so the fact that there continues to be hostility towards immigrants, and particularly Asian immigrants, in my mind as an Asian American Studies scholar, is completely not surprising. The next kind of set of dates that I want to bring your attention to is something that I'm sure all of you know very well. It's this period of the Korean War, which really became sort of like the ground on which the practice of international adoption from Korea began. There was some international adoption that happened kind of during and after World War II, but this period of the adoption industry, as we know it, the international adoption industry, really has roots in this period when the Holts, which again we'll be talking about who those people are if you haven't heard of them before and what they did, really brought into both immigration history and American history kind of like the normalization of this process of the adoption of children from one country to another country. We also are going to talk a little bit about when immigration specifically for adoptees was normalized in immigration history and immigration policy in the United States, and that was in 1961. The period between the Korean War armistice and 1961, there was a lot of kind of stopgap legislation that was put in place to allow travel papers for Korean children to travel to the United States to become the adopted children of American citizens. In 1961, policy was passed that created this thing called an orphan visa, that essentially was a non-quota visa that allowed for a minor child to be brought into the country for the purposes of adoption. So this is sort of like, in immigration adoption history, is a kind of a watershed moment, because there now is an instrument that most of us who have immigrated to the United States to be adopted came in under one of these orphan visas. So the next kind of period of time that we want to draw your attention to is the mid-90s. So this is during the Clinton administration. A number of pieces of legislation that were passed, but the one that I want to bring your attention to is, it has a very, very long name, which of course I did not write down, but essentially this is the piece of federal policy that ties conviction of a crime with a sentence greater than 1 year for people who have been convicted in the United States but are not U.S. citizens. This is the piece of legislation that then triggers a deportation order after that person has served their sentence. And so at the time when this legislation was passed, well, before the time that this legislation was passed, I am not aware of any adoptees who were deported, even though there were adoptees at that time who likely did not have U.S. citizenship. I think that the possibility of adoptees who had grown up in the United States and American families being deported before this time was really unheard of. The first adoptee deportation that we're aware of happens in 1989, so 3 years after this legislation was passed. As a response to the kind of consequences of the 1996 reforms, you then see in 2000 the passage of this thing called the Child Citizenship Act that Adam Smith referred to in the video. And so this was kind of an attempt to protect adoptees from this type of deportation order. But as Adam Smith mentioned, it was not retroactive in nature. And so adoptees who came in, ostensibly between anybody who had come sort of before this period, or who wasn't an adult, who hadn't turned 18 before this period, who was not a citizen, was not covered or protected by the Child Citizenship Act. And we're going to be talking a little bit more also about the Child Citizenship Act. And then we're going to be ending our talk and then kind of segueing to the work of these wonderful people sitting next to me who are going to present after us to talk about adoptee advocacy around these issues, which really started in the 2010s and then are continuing to this day. Okay, so I know that this is hard to see, and I realize that I put like way too much data on this graph, which I apologize for. But I wanted you to see kind of a visual representation of how many people we're talking about, and kind of what percentage of these people or what portion of these people are from Korea. So the blue bars that are kind of the bars that are on the bottom, this is the number of Korean adoptees who come to the United States from the mid-50s, and this graph goes to 2015. And so you can see, thanks. You can see there's a couple of peaks, but that this adoption migration has been ongoing since Korean War armistice. In the 90s, other groups of other sending countries kind of became more prominent. And so these kind of multicolored bars that start in the 90s represent numbers of adoptees who are coming to the United States from other countries. But for the purposes of our talk today, are also subject to the same kind of immigration issues that Korean adoptees were subject to. I thought the folks in this room might be interested in this graphic. So this is a graphic that represents the number of all Korean immigrants to the United States from the 40s until the end of the 2020s. That's the line on top. The line on the bottom is the number of Korean adoptees who came during that time. And so this is I don't know if we're going to be talking much about this, but this is a representation of the gender breakdown of Korean adoptees who come over the years. And so when we talk about the population of Korean adoptees, we believe there's a worldwide population of about 200,000, and about half of those adoptees have been adopted in the United States. In the United States, we believe there's about, in the United States, we believe there's about 500,000 transnational adoptees. And about 20% of those individuals are adopted from Korea. About 10% of the Korean American population is adopted, and I think that many people in Korean American communities are very surprised to learn that. In the state of Minnesota, where there's a very high proportion of Korean adoptees and a more modest Korean American population, that's about half. So in the state of Minnesota, adoptees are about half of the Korean American population. And as I mentioned before, the gender breakdown of Korean adoptees is about 55% female and 45% male. So that's kind of the population we're talking about. So I'm now going to hand it over to my.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, I'm Alina Kim. I teach at UC Irvine, and I'm very happy to be collaborating with Park Nelson. She also mentioned that I'm not adopted, I'm Korean American. But I have been studying Korean adoption and Korean adoptee communities for over 20 years. And this talk is just a kind of distillation of some of the research that we've done and published. So what I'm going to do is talk very specifically about the adoption legislation that has governed the lives of Korean American and other international adoptees in the United States. And some of it will be very detailed, but I will along the way underscore kind of what we believe are the most important parts of this. That's a little too bright. Can people still see the slide? Okay. So we mentioned Harry Holt, and this is an image of Harry Holt delivering children from South Korea in the 1950s. They became very famous in 1955 when they adopted 8 children, most of them mixed race children from South Korea. And in order to do so, they had to get permission from the US Congress. And the bill that was passed was this Private Law 475. It passed both houses of Congress unanimously in July 1955. And we derived the title of our talk from this bill, which was called an Act for the Relief of Certain Korean War Orphans, in which it states, it refers to the children as natural-born alien children of Harry and Bertha Holt, citizens of the United States. The bill was eventually signed into law by President Eisenhower on August 11th, 1955. And because the existing legislation known as the Refugee Relief Act only allowed American citizens to bring 2 children to the country, they required this special law in order to bring an additional 6 children. So you may know Harry Holt was deeply Christian and evangelical. He went to Korea believing that God had basically called on him to bring 8 children from the war-ravaged country to the comfort and security of America. So instead of coming as refugee children as they would have under the Refugee Relief Act, these children came in as quote-unquote natural-born alien children of citizens of the United States. And this is what we call a new legal category, the natural-born alien. On the one hand, the child is considered to be as if naturally born to their American parents, but they are also aliens in the fact that they are not US citizens and they're immigrants. And it's this division between kinship, of being naturally born, and being and citizenship, being immigrants, that has sort of laid the groundwork for what we are facing today. So the alienship of adopted children, as we have heard, was in place until 2000 and is still affecting those who haven't, whose immigration status doesn't apply under the Child Citizenship Act. So what we underscore is the legal ambiguity for adoptees has produced certain cultural effects. One is that for many, many decades, many adoptees did not consider themselves to be immigrants at all. And we call this a kind of unusual self-identification as being a non-immigrant immigrant. And there's a deeply ambivalent feeling among adoptees about being identified as immigrants, viewing themselves as immigrants. But as Kim mentioned, particularly since Trump's presidency, when there was so much more anti-immigrant sentiment that was unleashed, deep xenophobic nationalist sentiments, and a lot of violence against immigrants, and particularly in terms of the anti-Asian violence that we saw in light of the COVID epidemic. Many adoptees had to face, sometimes for the first time, this question about whether or not they're immigrants, and what, if they are, what kind of immigrants are they? So when the question of adoptee citizenship first came to light, many adoptees would claim, well, we're immigrants, but we're special, we're exceptional, because we're adopted. And we wouldn't argue with this, But I think that this is kind of one of the patterns that we started to see happening. On the one hand, adoptees finding themselves in newly ambiguous relationship to their own adoptive parents, some of whom supported Trump, voted for Trump, identified with Trump's policies, and didn't see their own adopted children as being immigrants, as being people who might be targeted by people who supported the racist views of Trump and the anti-immigrant sentiment. And so what we saw around 2016 and afterwards were, and this is what we'll be hearing about soon enough, were interesting and important new alignments between adoptees and other immigrants, including Korean immigrants, to think about what does it mean for adoptees to be immigrants, and how can these new identifications lead to important alliances among with other immigrant communities and among transnational adoptees who also share the vulnerability around citizenship as Korean adoptees do. Okay, so these are some of the legislative acts that were passed. We learned about the 1955 Act to bring Holt's children, and in 1961, there was a Special Immigration Act that was passed specifically for international adoption. And what this really meant was that US Congresspeople understood that international adoption was here to stay. It started with Korean adoption, it started to expand over the years, and so special immigration law was needed. And this is where the quote-unquote orphan visa was established. The orphan visa essentially allowed up to 2 children to be adopted by US citizens, and it required the children to be legally severed from any existing biological family in their sending countries. And after that step was taken, then American citizens could petition their government to classify that orphan as an immediate relative. So this was a way to have adoptees' immigration align with existing immigration policy, which granted priority for immediate family reunification. So this is how we get from the natural-born alien citizen into an international adoptee who is both an immediate relative but also a non-citizen. At the same time, you have, so this is where we argue this gap between kinship and citizenship got reproduced. So that, again, so you can have immediate relatives to US citizens who also lacked citizenship. In 1977, you had activist adoptive parents going to their congresspeople and saying, we don't like 2 things about the existing law. One is we can only bring 2 children from overseas, and maybe we want to adopt more than 2. And the second was that they were required to wait 2 years before they could naturalize their adopted children. And they felt like this was too long and that it made their children unequal in the eyes of the law compared to children who were biological children or children who were adopted in this country. The reason I bring this amendment to your attention is because in the course of the congressional testimony that took place in order to debate whether or not to pass this law, certain things were revealed. There were Department of State officials who were interviewed by Congress to explain what is the process by which children are granted permission to enter the country. And what was revealed was that, on the one hand, American citizens could only bring 2 children in through the existing law, but oftentimes individual officials would use non-preference visas to allow parents to adopt a 3rd child or a 4th child. And so this was largely done at their own discretion. The other thing that was revealed was that when it came to the whole process of adoption, because children were brought into the country after being approved by the Department of State and then given visas through the INS, formerly, or or currently known as the Department of Homeland Security, formerly INS, what it meant was that there was very little oversight. So this is an exchange between a congressman from Pennsylvania with a representative from the INS. And I'll just read it to you. So the congressperson asks, what does INS do if the adoption does not take place? Meaning, you've granted a visa to this child. What happens if after the child comes into the country, the adoption actually doesn't happen? And the INS representative says, after we have approved the petition and after a child has come here, and he says, yes, we don't do anything, sir. We don't even have that information. So the congressman asks him, shouldn't you have that? And the INS representative says, I'm sure we don't have that information. And the congressman follows up by saying, my question is, shouldn't you have it? Shouldn't somebody have it? So this is where you start to see evidence of the what has been known as the disjointed process of international adoption. And the disjointed process, I'll just describe, it's a term that we borrow from a legal scholar, Richard Carlson, but he in 1977 noted this. So on the one hand, you have foreign courts determining the legality of the original relinquishment of the child. And then you have US Immigration and Naturalization Service determining the visa entry and citizenship eligibility of the child. And then you have the US State Department determining the eligibility of the child to be adopted by US citizens. And then US state courts determining the legality of adoption under family law. And then adoption agencies oversee this process. But in large part, all of these other entities are relying upon the best practices of the agencies and the paperwork that they provide. So this disjointed process is, as Richard Carlson writes, characterized this way. Despite the interdependence of the foreign relinquishment, United States immigration, and state adoption processes, each is governed by entirely separate bodies of law. As a result, the law and process of transnational adoption remains disjointed. Most transnational adoptions succeed despite the lack of forthright law, but the failure of lawmakers to provide a clear process creates unnecessary risks and uncertainties. So we would argue that it's this very disjointed process in which none of the entities are actually communicating with each other directly, but only through the adoption agencies that has created the vulnerability of stateless adoptees. So what are the outcomes of this disjointed process? You have adoptees whose adoptions were never really legalized or legally finalized, in US family courts. You have adoptees whose adoptions were finalized but who were never naturalized, as we know. So they're recognized as members of their family legally, but not as US citizens. You have adoptees whose adoptions were never finalized and who were also never naturalized. So and we'll hear more about this in a second, but with the adoptee immigration rights movement, we started to understand the extent to which all of this disjointed process has produced all of these irregularities. So many adoptees didn't even realize this until they were persuaded to look at their own documents and to ask questions about, did I ever receive a citizenship certificate? Has my adoption actually been finalized? So many adoptive parents just assumed that the process was smooth. This is what everyone told them. And particularly with the Korean adoptions, that they were very smooth and unproblematic. And so the oversight, and you have to remember, adoption agencies in the United States are entirely privately run entities. So there's very little oversight, there's very little regulation, and no one was checking whether or not this paperwork had been filed, whether or not these adoptees were being protected under the law. So ultimately, we have to ask who is accountable, and especially for adoptees without citizenship, and who now may be subject to deportation or removal. Oh, we're not done yet. We're still going on, because there are other implications.
So it's not until the late 1990s that this gap that Alina is referring to really starts to become problematic for adoptees in terms of citizenship issues. Because this is a moment which I kind of talked about in the introduction, was this time when US immigration policies really start to be used as a punishment for people who are in the criminal justice system. And so the acts that I referred to in the introduction, I actually have, they're very long names. One of them is the Interterrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, and the other is the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act. They were both signed into law by Bill Clinton in 1996. And basically, these acts allow for the deportation of immigrants who are convicted of crimes that carry out a prison sentence of over a year. And so the passage of these acts directly led to the first deportations of adult adoptees. We also, in our, well, really Alina, in her research, uncovered evidence that in hearings for the passage of these acts, that there was people were aware, they were made aware that adoptees who were adopted into American families would very likely be deported under this act. And so it's not really a mistake that this happened. I think that in a lot of ways at this time, the knowledge that adoptees could be deported under this act, under these acts, was kind of considered like an acceptable piece of collateral damage when they passed these acts into law. As far as we're aware, the first deportation of the first adoptees deported as a result of, well, the first adoptees deported were John Gall III, who was adopted to, or was deported to Thailand in 1999, and Hal Herbert, who was deported to Brazil in 2000, and unfortunately was murdered there in 2004. So in response to these widely publicized cases, and because of the fear that their own adopted children could be deported, US citizen adoptive parents successfully lobbied for the passage of the Child Citizenship Act, which I mentioned happened in 2000 and then became effective on February 27th of 2001. So the act conferred automatic citizenship to children adopted by US citizens without requiring the additional process of naturalization. For parents who'd already adopted, the act allowed them to apply for their child's naturalization, and they could acquire this thing called a certificate of citizenship. And the language of the act made it very clear that the subject of the law is the US citizen adoptive parent. And so even though these adoptive parents were advocating for their children, it's really the parents that were sort of given the agency and the power to, and they were the ones who lobbied for this, right? So they wanted their children to become citizens. So although the act was originally intended to confer retroactive citizenship on transnational adoptees, the legislation was compromised because of anxiety about not appearing tough on crime. And I just want to comment on this slide. So this organization, this is an adoptive parents organization who were one of the parents organizations who lobbied in order to get the Child Citizenship Act passed. And so, what I wanted you to be able to see from this slide is that even though the Child Citizenship Act might seem similar to the legislation, the proposed legislation that we're going to be talking about, that the panel's going to be talking about in more detail later. In a lot of ways, it's also very different because the folks who were doing the lobbying, the folks who were really kind of advocating for this, which, by the way, like the Child Citizenship Act passed pretty easily. By a large margin, and it was bipartisan, and it was not a controversial piece of legislation at all. And so we're suggesting that one of the reasons that happened so easily is because the constituents who are the most concerned about this were not the adoptee immigrants, but their white adoptive parents who are US citizens. So as we mentioned before, the Child Citizenship Act didn't really counteract the 1996 anti-immigration laws, but instead kind of provided, I guess, a remedy for adoptees who are still children to get citizenship so they would not end up in the same situation as those who come before them. So I know that Adam Smith and other people have kind of thrown out some numbers, but in our investigation, there's actually no available US government statistics that count the numbers of transnational adoptees who lack US citizenship. Or the number who are in detention proceedings or deportation proceedings, or the number who've been deported, or those who are at risk of removal. The information that exists around individual cases has been compiled by watchdog and advocacy groups, based on newspaper reports or surveys, or these days based on kind of social media advocacy around it. And I know that the Alliance is going to talk members of the Alliance are going to talk about this a little bit more, but because we don't have a clear idea of exactly how many people are affected by this, we're kind of rely on the numbers that we see from these watchdog organizations. So the Alliance is tracking about 50 individuals, adopted individuals without citizenship, though we heard from Amanda yesterday that new people come in all the time. Another adoptee advocacy group for citizenship, the Adoption Rights Campaign, which was active kind of before, it was like the organization that sort of preceded the Alliance. They have tracked, in their time, they tracked adoptees from 25 countries who were lacking citizenship, and so this is definitely an issue that affects not just Korean adoptees, but adoptees from many, many countries. Research by the Korean-based adoptee-led Adoptee and Naturalization Deportation group called AND suggests there are at least 108 deported adoptees in South Korea alone. So we're going to wrap up, but as we're concluding, we wanted to kind of offer some suggestions for advocacy from this group. So, obviously, we're all here because we are supportive of citizenship for all transnational adoptees, and that's sort of like that's the brief for today. But Alina and I also wanted to suggest that there's other ways that communities can advocate for adoptees, and to kind of think through a more equitable praxis when we're talking about adopted people. I'm going to breeze through some of these very quickly, but there's a couple that I'm going to spend a little more time on. So, I think it's really important that we understand adoption as a service that's really should be designed to support children, not in order to provide children for families. And I think that's really core in kind of child welfare, or a child welfare-centered understanding of adoption. Also, so many adoptees, so many Korean adoptees, and Alina's and my research really bears this out. Almost all of them talk about their experiences of racism and discrimination in the United States. And so investing in understanding and undoing racism here in the United States is also an important way to support these adopted individuals in the United States. Also working with countries of origin to sort of fix issues around sexism and classism. So for those of us who have been in this adoption research space for a long period of time, we know that generally it's very vulnerable populations, usually of women, who have their children, who end up surrendering their children into the child welfare system, and who eventually then become eligible for international adoption. Empowered groups of people are having the power to be able to hang on to their children. It's really very disenfranchised groups of people who end up really being pressured and forced to surrender their children into an adoption system. Go to the next slide. So kind of a corollary to that is really working to abolish sort of the social and economic and cultural conditions that force many first mothers or birth mothers to relinquish children for adoption. We find in countries that have comprehensive welfare systems that support women, no matter what their marital status is, no matter what their class and social status is, there's actually very little relinquishment of children into a child welfare system. And so we believe that this means that if women are given the resources to keep children, most of them would like to do that. It's important to understand adoption as a last resort for children in out-of-home placement. That there actually are other options before we kind of think about adoption to keep children in if not with their birth parents, then with extended family, or at least in their communities of origin. And I think that the thing that I want to maybe press the most with this group is advocating for Korean adoptees to be accepted as full members of the Korean American community. Historically, there's been a pretty big gap between Korean adoptee communities, and the kind of larger Korean community in the United States. And I think that this is for a number of different reasons. But what I want to point out to you is there's actually quite a long history of adoption reform activism in the United States. So before Korean adoption became very common in the US, the kind of sending communities that were kind of being pushed into providing children to the adoption system in the US was the African American community and the American Indian community. And that is still the case today. But those communities, the African American community in different iterations and tribal communities have really advocated for maintaining more agency and authority over their own children. So there's actually been quite a bit of reform activism within those communities. That's just not a form of activism that we've seen in immigrant communities that correspond to transnational adoptee communities in the United States, including the Korean American community. And so I actually think that there's quite a bit of room to develop this as an activist space in Korean communities. I think that advocacy for adoptee issues would be really meaningful, both in the political work that we're trying to do and in adoptee communities, if that understanding can be kind of more fully embraced. I think we're gonna end it there. Thank you.
Now I realize I should introduce all the speakers, so I'm going to do that right now. Next, we're going to hear from Emily Wernicke. She's a Korean American transnational adoptee and a leader of the Alliance for Adoptee Citizenship. For almost a decade, Emily has shared her story with the public, met with hundreds of legislators, and spoken at press conferences and events about the issue of adoptees without citizenship. Emily was adopted by U.S. citizen parents in 1964 as a baby. A lifelong California resident, her father was a World War II veteran, and her parents believe she became a U.S. citizen with her when her adoption was finalized. Unfortunately, this was not the case, and Emily is an adoptee without citizenship, educating, organizing, and advocating for citizenship for all inter-country adoptees. Previously, she worked for many years in the aerospace industry. And when Emily is done speaking, we're going to hear from Amanda Cho, PhD, who is a Korean American transnational adoptee, who is actively involved in civil rights and advocacy organizations that support communities of color, particularly Asian Americans and Asian American adoptees. She's the policy manager for the Alliance of Adoptee Citizenship. Amanda lives in Atlanta and is a founding member of the Korean Adoptee Association of Georgia. She's a member of KAAN's advisory board and serves as a conference co-chair for KAAN's annual conference. She volunteers for other adoptee-led organizations and has collaborated with other Korean adoptees on research projects that explore the experiences of Asian American transnational adoptees. And finally, we have Nick Green, who's not, whose bio was not included in the program, but he's a pardon campaign consultant for Alliance for Adoptee Citizenship organization. He's also a Korean American adoptee who is involved in the adoptee community, especially with helping Emily and others, such as herself, with working towards reclaiming her citizenship. Thank you.
Hello? Okay.
First, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Alliance for Adoptee Citizenship. This is a coalition of several organizations that are working together to advocate for the ACA and also support adoptees without citizenship.
I'm the policy manager. I'm Amanda Cho, and I'm also a Korean adoptee who was adopted in 1978 and at 3 months old. And like as we said, with the Child Citizenship Act of 2000, it excluded adoptees that were born before February 1983. So I was naturalized as a child, but if I was not naturalized, I would be in this situation. I would be needing this bill. And so what we're doing right now is we're working to advocate for the ACA, which will actually be introduced on Tuesday, June 4th, so next week. Please follow our website and our social media, and you'll learn about the bill number and how you can work to advocate with us to pass this bill. Several of us went to DC a few weeks ago and we lobbied for it, and we met with over 51 offices. This is a bipartisan bill, so we need to have equal number of representatives and senators who are Democrats and Republicans to make this work. So we are looking for co-sponsors, Republicans and Democrats, to co-sign and co-sponsor this bill after it's introduced. The co-leads of the bill will be in the House, Representatives Smith and Bacon from Nebraska, and Senators Hirono and Collins from Maine. So yes, so be on the lookout for that in next week. Now I will hand this over to Emily, and she will tell you her story.
Good afternoon, everybody. I thank you for showing up. My name is Emily Warnke. I'm an international adoptee. I was adopted at 3 months old by American citizen. I always thought I was a citizen because I was told by my adopted parents. I was told by my adopted parents I was naturalized the process. They went through HOPE. I had another adopted sibling that came with me. She's not here no longer. So anyways, what we were doing is, well, I want to tell you, I worked, I paid in taxes. I worked for aerospace as an A1 inspector. I had other jobs. I didn't know as life went on that I have a spine disease, that I would be no longer able to work. I am a woman with no country. I am under deportation. I don't get my full benefits because I do not have my naturalization where I pay taxes into. So it's very hard for me to live by the means that I get through. I was married to an American citizen. I have a son that is an American citizen. He's 43 years old. But this has been very hard for me. And I'm requesting a pardon from Governor Newsom. And I'm praying that you support that pardon. So that would help me to be able to go back and get the deportation off, and maybe get me a green card and get citizenship. And I know this sounds crazy, but it's just, this is the way that I have to live now. This was not my goal in life. My goal was to continue to work for aerospace, retire. Actually, I wanted to retire in Georgia because I love gardening, but that was not possible for me. So we have a lot of other adoptees that we're finding out as they get older and they're going to get their retirement, they're being turned down. Even though they pay taxes, they're finding out they do not have citizenship. So there's a panel paper that's on your tables, please find them. They're for petition for a pardon. I'm gonna pass this over to Nick, but also what I do, even if I had citizenship, I would continue to do it. Because one thing my father taught me is being in war, he would never leave another soldier behind. I will never leave another adoptee behind as long as I'm breathing, as long as God keeps me here. Because my compassion goes out to them. I have faced a lot of things, but by the grace of God, I'm still here. And while I'm here, I'm going to keep doing what I have to do. But I will pass this to Nick, and he'll take it from here.
So, Emily, thanks for sharing your story. And I think it's important to hear it because when we hear the academic or, sort of the factual side of, individuals that face deportation, we see more of like a bigger picture. But when you actually hear from Emily what she's gone through, it makes it more realistic and more meaningful. Also getting to know Emily and talk to her, I mean, everything in your life is American. Like growing up in California, finding out, like your passion, your love of cats, just growing up here, like this, in a way, you're a reminder that, it could be a friend, a family member, a neighbor that's in the same situation. And having lived in America and like calling this truly home, like this really, to me, it's just a paperwork issue. Like it's an administrative error that really does need to be corrected. So I also want to thank Cohen Pacific LA for and Heja for posting this, because I think even getting to talk to we spent some time with Heja yesterday, and I think it was very meaningful for us to hear about what Cohen does and how close of a network you are to look out for community. So to us, we feel like an extended part of the community, and we definitely warmly feel that way. So we really appreciate that, because being adopted, we all come from different backgrounds, and sometimes we do feel like we're alone, or like we kind of have to find and forge our way for community, family, and friendship. So it's warmly felt, your presence here and giving us this space. So again, just to reiterate, the work that's being done from a big picture standpoint, and I really am amazed. Emily and Judy, Judy is not here. You're doing a lot of the advocacy work. You're really stepping up to the plate and rolling up sleeves, because this is really not an easy thing to do. So we do have petition forms, because we do believe that there's strength in numbers. So with Governor Newsom, what we're doing to help out is basically get together support letters from community members, legislators, and also signatures. So if you have a moment at some point during this event, I believe there's a form where you can put down your signature in support.
There's also a Scantron behind us, or a QR code, not Scantron. And you can scan and sign the petition online. But yes, this is another project that we're working on at AAC, is the pardon campaign for Judy and Emily. Judy is a Chinese adoptee, and Emily Korean, and then they're both in their 60s, and they're both needing resources, assistance, like they're retired, they're needing help. So we're hoping to get this pardon from Governor Newsom, and that's Nick is the new pardon campaign consultant who's managing this. But I also wanted to share too, I've been in this position just for 2 months, and I've already had 3 adoptees without citizenship reach out to me just within these 3 months, or reach out to our organization. One of them is a Korean adoptee. So more and more adoptees are connecting with us for assistance. The Korean adoptee who reached out tried to apply for a passport because of the Real ID that law that's going into effect. So we foresee many more reaching out to us and having the same issue. So this is an issue that we really hope that the ACA will resolve and fix soon.
And yeah, so just to wrap it up on our end, basically, yeah, any support you can give, just a signature alone shows strength in numbers. And then, because, you know, if you are interested in learning more, getting involved or donating, we have our Alliance for Adoptee Citizenship website, which should be displayed. It's right down here at the bottom. And then we'll be here for the event. So if you have any questions or just want to, you know, talk to us, feel free to do so. Thank you.
For our panelists. Now we're going to open up the floor for any questions you may have.
시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 그러면은 김혜자 회장님께서 혹시 통역이 필요하실 경우에는 도움을 주시겠고요. 여기
And also we're going to give $10 gift card, a Starbucks gift card to first 10 people who ask questions. So ask away.
10분에 한해서 $10짜리 스타벅스 상품권도 마련이 되어 있습니다. 가장 먼저 손들어
네,
주셨습니다.
안녕하세요. 저는 얼바인 부시장 태미킴입니다. 반갑습니다. I'm council member for the city of Irvine, Tammy Kim. And the question that I have is, I looked at the House resolution, and I'm happy to send a letter directly to Governor Newsom myself, who I know personally. But the question I have is, I noticed on the signatories, only Andy Kim was the only congressional member that has signed on, but we actually have 3 more. We have Young Kim, we have Michelle Pop-Steele, and we have in the Washington State, Marilyn Strickland. So have those offices been reached out to? Additionally, we have Senator Dave Min in the state legislature. So are we utilizing, we've got Joyce Ahn in Buena Park, we've got Fred Jong in Fullerton, we've got John Lee in city, and this is the first time that no one's actually reached out to me directly, and I'm happy to help, but are we utilizing the collective voices of our Korean American politicians to actually help out with this? So that's my question.
So yeah, no, this is a very good prompt. Of course, like when we looked at the roster of congressional persons, California, there's like over 50. So we're basically targeting very specific ones. So I think there's probably 4 or 5 that we have on board in these support letters. We haven't engaged the Korean ones yet, which is actually a very good point, right? Like to start, within our, like ethnic communities. But so far there's Senator Padilla, I think there's Judy Chu, locally, Congressional Rep Ruiz, and then Garcia for Hammond, California.
But just to, when we talk about engaging our Korean American community, if you're not reaching out to us, how can the Korean American community help you? Like, we're the lowest hanging fruit. We're here to support, but we also need to be contacted as well, because I think the Korean American community, they want to support efforts for this. So I think we're the lowest hanging fruit for this.
Yes, so in the past with the ACA, we have received support from all of those representatives. So the bill's about to be reintroduced. It wasn't last year, but in the past they have. The pardon campaign is something new we're doing this year. So we're just starting with that. So we are working on reaching out to them, but right now we're just starting with the local.
Yeah. Also, I feel fortunate because to have an actual council member come to me and offer to do a support letter is very refreshing, because oftentimes when I reach out to a lot of the reps' offices, I get put into a line. So if more of them could be like yourself, that would be very refreshing.
So give us some time. Like, I've been in this position 2 months. Nick has been in this position for a month. So we're getting there.
Yes, we're actually, the pardon was another step for for me and Judy. It's because of our age. So this is a new thing that we are doing. So if you could work with us, we will be so grateful. This is, we're trying ins and out, what we can do. So yes, this part is new, that we are doing. So, and we thank you.
Yeah, so I hopefully don't put people to sleep, but basically, if people are curious about what goes on behind the scenes, for Emily and people such as herself to restore their citizenship, process-wise, there's various steps. Like one of them is to get a certificate of rehabilitation from the parole board, which is it's its own laborious process. Then the court basically gives a recommendation from wherever the county the member that they're in, and then that recommendation goes to the governor. So basically, it's a game of going through administrative steps. Interesting thing is, if people remember Governor Brown, and I don't know if they get in minute details about his MO, but Governor Brown would typically grant pardons on holidays. So there is sort of a predictability to like when people could anticipate getting pardoned and then be able to seek citizenship. The challenge with Newsom is, I mean, there's a lot of politics, and I don't want to go into separation of church and state, but to a more separate point, Newsom's track record is unpredictable. Like he basically probably has like a stack of papers of like requests. So, our fingers are crossed. And actually, you said you have no Newsom. If you can, I'll give you a $20 Starbucks gift card if you reach out to Newsom. Oh, okay, that'd be wonderful. But anyways, just behind the scenes, I also want to call it out because I think it's worthwhile. Like the amount of work and patience that Emily and Judy and others have done with this whole thing at the mercy of like administrative processes is very commendable. Because it's hard, like it's not a great thing. It's not like waiting for an Amazon package. It's like waiting for something very important to go through. So hats off to that.
Hello, my name is Shin Soo-young. I'm a member of Korean Pacific Coin LA. My question is that whether you're adoptee or not, if an American can sponsor you, the qualified American can sponsor you, can you not get citizenship? I think Emily said your husband was a US citizen and your son was also a citizen. Can they sponsor you to get a citizenship?
No. My son, my husband, when I was married, I got married young because I had my son when I was 6. But my husband was very abusive. I have multiple police reports of his abuse. My son had to see some of it. It's sad. At the time I was married, I thought I was naturalized through my adoption, and they don't care about that. My son.
Was your husband U.S. citizen?
No, my husband is a citizen.
So he could sponsor you. Whether you are naturalized or not.
My ex-husband cannot sponsor me. I'm under deportation. I'm a woman with no country. Nobody, my son cannot sponsor me. I would have to be out of the country for them to sponsor me.
So I think you make a very interesting point, which is like, well, if you marry a U.S. citizen, does that grant you U.S. citizen's status? Sort of like a foreigner marrying, getting married versus like a green card. So I don't know the logistics behind that, but it seems like whatever status that Emily was in, it nullified that, right? Because we know that typically non-U.S. citizen marries a U.S. citizen, that typically grants it citizenship, but it doesn't seem the case. in this one.
Okay, that's because her husband was not in a position to sponsor her. But in other circumstances, if you're a US citizen, then you could sponsor somebody if you want.
She's already illegal. She's considered illegal here. You can only do the family sponsorship if you are legal and
Councilwoman Kim might have a point, which is like, it's not like a neutral status, it's a negative status, like a legal status. So it's like it's struck against already. As opposed to a foreigner who doesn't have like a legal status. They're going through the channels, right? So.
Good morning. I do not have actually questions, but I have a statement I would like to make for the sake of Korean diaspora in this country. You are not supposed to be the one who would ask for this kind of thing. We should have been. We Korean diasporas and Koreans in Korea, to help you, to support you. But we were slow. We are behind, and you had to do yourself and asking these things. I feel shameful about that. We should have been. So I really thank you for your courage and confidence, and please make sure that we will be with you. And it should be throughout the Korean American society, as well as American society, not necessarily Korean. Americans, when they were born, and they were brought in as a child, it should have been given. It should have been given to you. This country is not someone's. It's all of ours. And you guys were little, and you did not come here on your own will. You were adopted, and it should have been given to you. No questions, right? So we should really do something about this and walk with you. And I really thank Cohen in doing this. And this is the beginning. And by the way, I'm the president of the Foundation for Korean Language and Culture. And I do something very different what you guys are doing. I'm promoting Korean language and culture in the secondary schools in this country. I just went to San Francisco yesterday. I came back, and we are very strongly committed, but it's slow. Everything is slow. But we are here behind you, so please do not get discouraged. Thank you.
Hello, my name is June. First of all, thank you so much for being here today and shedding light on this sort of unbelievable and ridiculous situation that you guys are in. I wanted to ask if you can illuminate the legal rights, the differences between the legal rights of these so-called natural-born alien citizens. Crazy. I don't even know. I hope I said that correctly. So what is the difference between a person who finds himself in that category and someone who is a citizen? Like, what are the different legal rights that they have? Because you mentioned, Emily, that you were paying taxes, and I don't know what the legalities are, but I think you're entitled to, like, legally, I'm wondering if you're legally entitled to the benefits of those taxes, because you paying your taxes is something that we do as a citizens of the United States to support our government in their support of protecting our people. So I'm a little bit dumbfounded. Like, I don't even know what the legal, it's almost like I wonder if you could sue the American government for taking your taxes and refusing to give you your basic rights. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what I thought too. And I don't think any of us are attorneys on this panel, but no, just because you are working and you're paying your taxes, the IRS does not report you to ICE or you do not need to be a U.S. citizen to pay taxes and have a job. So it's not connected. So when you get to retirement and you're trying to collect your retirement, Medicare, Medicaid, you're unable to do that because that's when it's flagged. It doesn't make sense, but if anyone else can explain, I don't know if anyone.
When I had to, I think I went on state disability, and the state disability ran out, and my doctor finally told me, my doctor finally told me that I was not going to be able to ever work again. When I tried to get my Social Security, they're like, we can't give it to you because you're not a U.S. citizen. I said, well, I pay taxes to you, and I deserve what is mine. So what happened was I had to get a work permit to get part of them, and it's not hardly anything. It's like $1,000. Okay, I pay more taxes than $1,000 a month. But you got people that get what is it called? SSI that never worked in their life, and they get more money than I do. They get more benefits than I do. So the thing is this, because every year, and this sounds crazy, I have to apply for a work permit. I cannot work. So when I talked to the director of Social Security, they told me we could give you just a certain amount of it. And it's really sad because I've been here all my life. This is the only country I know. It's sad. And as people are getting older, more adoptees, they're finding out they can't get their benefits. Judy's one of them that you're signing a petition for. You work here, you pay taxes, and I never broke even. I also owe the state and the federal because as my son got older, I didn't have anything to claim. So I always owe the state and the government money. I work overtime. The more overtime, and you guys know, you're going to pay more taxes. But it is a sad thing that we don't get what we should as U.S. citizens. You know, we're babies. We don't know where we're coming. We're just coming into a country. But, working and being married to a U.S. citizen, still not knowing that I'm not a U.S. citizen. And my father that served for this country through the time they bombed Pearl Harbor, and he was going to the Korean War, but his wife got polio when it was an epidemic. So the thing is this, no, my father served for this country, and I'm grateful for this country. This is the only country I know, but I'm stateless. But thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ted Chung, and I'm a student representing the Next Generation Advocate. And I just had two questions. My first question is for just the panel. So, in my understanding, you need politicians to support these laws, to pass these laws, right? And so my question is, are there any, just like Mr. Adam Smith, right? And what can we do to pressure these politicians to pass these laws? And I'll ask my second question, and this is a question to Dr. Alina Smith. And you mentioned the disjointed process that many Korean adoptees go through. And so I want to know, while the Stateless Adoptee Citizenship Act is passed, while it's trying to be passed, are there any other specific efforts that have been implemented to try to help the victim of the disjointed process?
Yes, so you can reach out to your representatives and senators and write them when the bill's released on Tuesday next week. You'll have the bill number and you can refer to that. Go to our website and there's a list of ways that you can contact your representatives. We even have like a template that you can send to representatives and senators to get them to co-sign on. But remember, we actually need more Republican co-sponsors right now because we're trying to keep it bipartisan. So if you're in a Republican area, please, 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 we could use your help in that area. But yes, we want to keep it equal so that it stays bipartisan.
Regarding your second question, that's a really great question. And one of the things that could be done and has yet to be done is for the United States to sign on to the Hague Convention, which governs international adoption on the global scale. And the U.S. is South Korea also has yet to, they've signed but not ratified that treaty, which would try to ensure some measure of oversight on international adoption. That said, the number of adoptions have radically declined since the peak in the mid-2000s. But nevertheless, we still, adoption is a lifelong process, as any adoptee can tell you, that this is their lives. And the different kinds of challenges that adoption poses, appear, as is the case for Emily, when she hit retirement and suddenly realizes that she can't get her benefits. So I think all of those things need to be accountable to some body, right? And as I mentioned in my portion of the talk, what we know in the United States